President Trump and the Iranian Ayatollah circle the boxing ring amid the Israeli-Iran war. Pundits and officials argue over regime change amid discordant polls, and a major Supreme Court decision upholds Tennessee's ban on transgender experimentation for minors. Calls for assassination follow. I'm Tony Kinnett, host of the Daily Signal's Tony Kinnett Cast, syndicated nationally at 7 p.m. Eastern. It is June 19th, 2025. This is the Daily Signal's top news in 10. As of the end of last night, when this was recorded, President Trump is still debating on whether or not to deploy U.S. military action in Iran in any scope or form whatsoever. When President Trump was pushed on this yesterday, he kept the cards very close to the chest.
Facilities. Where's your mindset on that?
I can't say that, right? You don't seriously think I'm going to answer that question. Will you strike the Iranian nuclear component? And what time exactly, sir? Sir, would you strike it? Would you please inform us so we can be there and watch? I mean, you don't know that I'm going to even do it. You don't know. I may do it. I may not do it. I mean, nobody knows what I'm going to do. I can tell you this, that Iran's got a lot of trouble, and they want to negotiate. And I said, why didn't you negotiate with me before? All this death and destruction. Why didn't you negotiate? I said to the people, why didn't you negotiate with me 2 weeks ago? You could have done fine. You would have had a country. It's very sad to watch this. I mean, I've never seen anything like it. It's so, everyone thought it was going to be the reverse. I didn't think so. And I was telling them, you gotta do something. You gotta negotiate. And at the end, last minute, they said, no, we're not going to do that, and they got hit. Remember 60 days, and then came the 60. 61 is going to become a very famous number. That was one hell of a hit. That first hit, that was one hell of a hit. Not sustainable, to be honest. That's where it ended. It ended on the first night. Yes.
The previous night, Iran had promised a, quote, surprise for the night that the world will remember for centuries, end quote, that turned out to be pretty much nothing. The Ayatollah's account has since promised that there would be retaliation against Americans and that there was going to be doom and gloom brought upon them all. So far, none of that has been made manifest. Yesterday evening, the Wall Street Journal reported an exclusive in which President Trump reportedly told senior aides he had approved attack plans for Iran, but is holding off on giving the final order to see if Tehran will abandon its nuclear program entirely. About 40 minutes later, the New York Times reported that, quote, Iran would accept President Trump's offer to meet soon, end quote, citing an Iranian official from the foreign ministry. The debate over how involved the United States should be in Iran, or whether at all, is raging hot and heavy in online circles between pundits and officials over on the right, arguing whether regime change or strikes or advice via intelligence or complete isolation is the path to go. We sat down with Daniel Flesch from the Heritage Foundation to go over what specifically is on the table and what's best for Americans. Check it out.
Yeah, let me say from the outset, I understand why this conversation of regime change is being brought up, because people look back the last 20, 25 years of American foreign policy in the Middle East, and they see that nation building, regime change were kind of these slogans that were thrown around as it relates to Iraq and Afghanistan, not improperly. But it's a different situation here. For one thing, the president hasn't said our objective is regime change. He has said our objective is to ensure that Iran does not have nuclear capacity, nuclear weapons.
In fact, that's one of the main points that Trump has been so consistent on. Again, pointing out that Steve Guest video where he assembled 16 minutes of footage over the last at least a decade, perhaps more, where Trump has said consistently, Iran can't have a nuclear weapon, no ifs, ands, buts, or coconuts.
Right, exactly. And actually, every president since Clinton has said Iran will not develop nuclear weapons on their watch. And for the Israelis also, they have not said their objectives regime change. They've a few different objectives, but all told, it's essentially to make sure that Iran cannot pose an existential threat to Israel. And for that matter, regime change does not have to be a part of it. It's just the Ayatollah has to give up their genocidal campaign against Israel, give up their ambition for nuclear weapons, and not start producing ballistic missiles that would threaten Israel. So from the American perspective, all those things can be attainable without regime change.
The rest of that interview is excellent. Don't miss it. Check out the link over in the description. Regardless of the major arguments roiling online and some of the claims of a deeply divided GOP at the present time, polls simply do not bear that out. According to a Gray House poll on June 15th, 72% of Trump 2024 voters supported the United States attacking Iran if necessary. Only 19% of Trump voters were against the idea. According to a JL Partners poll exclusively given to the New York Post, 58% of Republican voters supported the United States launching its own strikes on Iranian military installations and key infrastructure. Only 25% opposed, with 17% neutral or unsure. 65% of, quote, MAGA Republicans would back strikes on Iran, compared to just 19% in opposition. According to another poll by the Ronald Reagan Institute, 60% of Republicans support strikes against Iran, 27% oppose, and then 32% of Democrats support, 51% oppose. Independents are split, with 35% supporting, 33% opposing, and the rest neutral or unsure. Harry Enton over on CNN, their political pollster and analyst, summed up a series of different polls which show a lot of the same results.
And overall, I feel like there's more support for Donald Trump's positions than is comically acknowledged. Oppose Iran getting a nuclear weapon. I mean, look at this. 79% of adults agree on that. They agree with Donald Trump. Iran cannot get a nuclear weapon. 83% of Republicans, 79% of independents, 79% of Democrats. When you get 79% of Democrats and 83% of Republicans agreeing on anything, you know that that position is the very clear majority in this country. And so the American public is with Donald Trump. They definitely oppose Iran getting nuclear weapons.
So this is a nuance here, but, Trump and Netanyahu both arguing that Iran is close to being capable of making a nuclear weapon. If that is the case, what is the feeling of Americans as to whether the United States should get involved in this conflict?
Right. If you buy Donald Trump's theory of the case, and I think that's important to note, this is polling from April. If Iran's trying to make a nuclear weapon, look at this. Overall, you get the slight plurality. I mean, it's within the margin of error, but the slight plurality of Americans actually favor U.S. airstrikes compared to 47% opposing it. Now, here's the other nugget I'll note, right? There's been a lot of talk online and on social media and in podcasts of a divide within the Republican ranks. But here on this question, if Iran's trying to make a nuclear weapon, look at that. 69% of Republicans, the clear vast majority of Republicans, favor U.S. airstrikes on Iran, on their nuclear facilities. But there is this substantial minority, 27%, who oppose such an idea. So it's not surprising you're hearing those other voices besides Donald Trump out there. There are plenty of them in the Republican ranks who oppose the U.S. striking Iran if they're trying to make a nuclear weapon. But the clear majority of Republicans are with Donald Trump. If, in fact, Iran is trying to make nuclear weapons, they do, in fact, potentially favor U.S. airstrikes.
And in a major decision yesterday, the Supreme Court upheld a Tennessee law prohibiting transgender drugs and surgeries for children, a major win for parental rights and conservative activists. The court ruled 6-3 along ideological lines in United States versus Scrimetti that Tennessee's law does not violate the 14th Amendment's Equal Protection Clause. Tennessee Attorney General Jonathan Scrimetti defended the law before the High Court in December, saying it was a matter of protecting kids from consequences of decisions that they cannot fully understand. Justice Sotomayor wrote the dissenting opinion stating, quote, Tennessee's ban applies no matter what the minor's parents and doctors think, with no regard for the severity of the minor's mental health conditions or the extent to which treatment is medically necessary for an individual child. There is no study at present which suggests that it is essential for a child's mental health in any way, shape, or form to accept transgender medical treatment on the long term. Transgender medical treatment via hormones are extremely carcinogenic and can lead to medical sterilization, and physical transgender procedures lead to severe immunocompromise as well as other medical issues for the rest of their lives. Following the decision led by Chief Justice John Roberts, calls over on the social media app Blue Sky began popping up suggesting, quote, protect trans kids, kill a Supreme Court justice, end quote, as well as fascism has only ever been dismantled through violence. Tired of pretending there's a high ground to take, these animals cannot be reasoned with, and I have no patience or empathy for them. I wish nothing but the absolute worst for every transphobic Nazi piece of bleep. Additional violent calls were made via references to Luigi Mangione, who assassinated the United Healthcare CEO in New York City earlier this year. Vice President J.D. Vance did make a Blue Sky account to talk about Clarence Thomas' opinion on the decision, and then was promptly suspended from the platform. It has since been reinstated. We covered this in a little bit more depth on last night's episode of the Tony Kinnett Cast. So before you go, head down to the description, make sure you're subscribed to the Tony Kinnett Cast, and check out that episode. And join us tonight at 7 p.m., where we cover all of the greatest news and nonsense of the day. I'm Tony Kinnett, and this has been the Daily Signal's Top News in 10. Take care.